You want me to sit on this one? Okay, here we go. Lean back.
Let's call the special called meeting, December 22nd, 2022 of the Dalton City Council meeting to order. Miss Sams will lead us in the pledge. Flag right over here.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands
one
nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. The agenda is for you. Any changes, deletions, additions? If not, I'll entertain a motion. We approve the agenda. So moved. Motion by Mr. Goodlet. Second by Mr. Farrer. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Said something.
I think Andrew's background.
Okay. Did,
It's falling and growing.
are y'all gonna want to speak? Okay, we'll just wait then to then instead of in public comment, we'll just wait till we get there. New business number one, ordinance 22-33, the request of,
Can you mute the, so we don't hear the background? Thanks.
the request of RW Sales LLC to rezone from heavy manufacturing M2 to high density residential R7. Attractive land totaling 0.28 acres located at 433 Spencer Street, Dalton, Georgia, parcel 12-238-19-008. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Was this the RW sales?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, this rezoning was submitted to us to be rezoned from M2 to the R7. And when we look at this area, we see a lot of industrial manufacturing zoning in the area and in general commercial zoning. And we looked at comprehensive plan. It was shown as an industrialized area. And basically just looking at development in the area, we didn't see any adjacent development. So generally, when we see these types of situations, it's not spot zoning, as some people might say. That's usually an instance where you have a commercial or manufacturing entity trying to locate within a residential area. But here we have a residential development looking to locate in an area surrounded by industrial and commercial development. So staff recommendation was not to approve based on that. There was no set precedent in the area or adjacent to the property for any kind of residential development. And the comprehensive plan had not intended for that area or shown for that area to be developed for residential use. We did hear from the petitioner, of course, who gave us the information about looking to redevelop that area and change from more of the manufacturing and commercial character to residential. We did hear one individual from the county who came up to speak in favor of that development for infill style development, higher density infill development within the city. We heard no opposition, and the planning commission recommended a unanimous recommendation to approve the R7 rezoning. I'm happy to answer any questions.
The staff recommended don't approve. The planning commission recommended do approve.
Yes, I think Chris Shiflett actually made the motion to approve, and he made that motion based on, I believe he was familiar with the area and had spent a lot of time in that area and felt like that would be a development, a good infill development for that location, that it wasn't going to be as an issue as considered in the staff analysis. So he made the motion to approve.
Now, this will actually front on Green Street, right? No, what's it gonna front on? Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Come to the microphone and Roger, it'll be recorded that way.
Could I hand you these?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm Roger Mitchell, and I'm a member of RW Sales, and our request is to take this property from the M2 to R7. which is high density, but we need the R7 in order to do the quadplex. That's the only way we could get the permit to build the quadplex. And there's enough space on the property in order to do this. So what we're proposing, you have a drawing here, and this is basically going to be, it would be a townhome setup to where there would be two of these buildings side by side in order to form a quadplex. I understand that area does have commercial. It has obviously, the large Mohawk facility next to it. But as you go north on Green Street, there's multiple single family, there's multiple duplexes. And then also we have a lot of dilapidation on Green Street. And what RW Sales has done over the past since 2016, we've bought multiple properties on Spencer and really maintain our properties well. We add value to the city. The property that we own on the corner of Spencer Street and Emory Street is the mini warehouses. So what we're proposing is to put the quadplex of townhomes on Emory Street, request from the fire department an Emory Street address because the curb cut already exists on Emory Street. In the past, and I don't know exactly how many years ago, there were homes on that lot. And I would think that there were two homes from the way the land is already there, probably shotgun type style, homes. So we would appreciate it if the city would allow us to build this minor development per se. It's just a minor quadplex. And what it's going to do, it's going to add value to our city. It's because really, I mean, that's what it really boils down to. And these will be more of an upscale. These will not be to spec per se. It won't be like a spec development. These will be more of a higher end build. These are not going to be built to be sold. These are going to be built to remain in our portfolio, real estate properties, and something that we would maintain in-house as far as aesthetics of the property. We can go in there and obviously with landscaping, provide buffers to where there's the building behind us is falling apart. And hopefully as time goes on, we've got to transition our city to where it looks better.
Owns that building?
I don't know who owns that particular building.
They doing in there?
I do not know the operation.
Something going on in there?
There is an operation in there. It's probably happened in the past year. That building was not falling down a year and a half ago. But over the past year, they brought in equipment and tore half of it down there and just left it, So we would propose to go in there and landscape it to basically buffer that the backside of that building or the side of that building. And that whole area there, that whole area is going to continue to grow. I feel, where Jolly Textile is, that is one of the best pieces of land on Glenwood Avenue. I mean, it's a beautiful piece of land. And there's a lot of old homes there on Glenwood that eventually need to be torn down.
Already removed two of them.
Oh, perfect. And so we can transition that into, it doesn't have to be commercial, and it definitely doesn't have to be M2, because, decades ago, Dalton was founded on manufacturing. That's what built Dalton. Well, if we would have known, if we would have had the ability to put all the M2 on the South Bypass, well, then we would have interior, in the city, we could build homes, but that's not the way it is. But I feel that we can transition, because what's happening is there's not enough land on the west side. On this side of the tracks, there's not enough land. So what we have to do in the future, and I'm speaking 10, 20, 30 years, because this is a plan, 10, 20, 30 years, we're going to have to transition this area. We have to transition this area.
Trying to do that.
And I agree. I mean, it's
By this plan, 925/7.
That's when we actually purchased the CADs. When we actually purchased, that's the planned cost.
It's just
That
the print off from this vendor from Architectural Designs.
Oh, okay, I
Yeah.
didn't know.
That's just the cost of the plans. These will probably be in the $1,200 a month range. And that's very comparable. If you look at, let's take for instance, Park Canyon, 1 bedroom, or excuse me, 2 bedroom, 1 baths are renting for $1,000 to $1,100. Well, ours will be 2 bedroom, 1.5 bath. You won't have to park and walk up 4 flights of steps. And plus those are 40 years old now. So what we're going to do is you'll be able to pull straight up to the door, walk straight in your home and live in a brand new home for $1,200. And that's pretty much where we'll be on the rent. Should be right at $1,200. We're figuring cost per unit will be about 100 and probably 115,000 per unit. So it'll be, 400, let's just say $450,000 build. And then obviously for the city purposes and county, well, you're going to be able to get more tax revenue from this development versus what we're paying currently for an empty lot.
Trying to redevelop that whole area as you will now, thanks to Vivian and Carlos Ramirez. What they've done on East Morris Street has been amazing.
Absolutely. Well, he actually rented from us when he first moved into town. Yeah, he rented one of the buildings on Spencer from us. So we've been involved in that transformation over there. And Wayne and I, what we want to do is we basically want to own every single piece of property that touches our property. So when we get an opportunity to buy something beside our property, we're going to do something with it. We're going to buy it. We're going to turn it in. Basically, I don't own anything that's not nice. I have no interest in owning anything that cannot be turned into something nice for this community.
Obviously not going to be manufacturing anymore. We know that.
I want to ask Ethan a question. I appreciate where the staff follows an algorithm of what does and does not qualify. Are there any concerns from a safety standpoint, impervious surface, stormwater, all of these things that we're looking at? Or is it just the principle of that it's out of sync with what's currently there?
Essentially just the fact it was out of sync with what is there and that we didn't have any plans currently laid in with a comprehensive plan for that area to redevelop for residential purpose. It seems like that may be an interest that we need to look into, and we're about to start the new comprehensive plan update. So this may be a focus area that we want to look at for the future for that.
When you all look at comprehensive plan updates, do you get information? Do you bring people like Mr. Mitchell in and other property holders in those areas to ask them what their long range plans are?
What we generally do is put together, we work with the city, so it of course be the mayor and council's opportunity to pull together a stakeholder committee. And I'll be meeting with you all very soon on that to put together a committee. And we oftentimes recommend that we absolutely like to have property owners, developers, and residents and a good mix of folks on that stakeholder committee that can explain the areas and what those long range plans need to be.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I want to make sure that we're not missing that this is anything other than out of sync. And that would be the reason that the staff made the recommendation they did to deny.
Right. There would be no issue with depreciating any adjacent property values. There would be no issue with traffic and things of that nature. It's just simply out of sync. And oftentimes we follow that pattern.
Sure.
And so based on that, without any outside information of what we learned in the public hearing and recently, that's why the staff recommendation was not to approve.
Okay.
Any other questions? Dennis, any questions?
No.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Motion by Ms. Sams, or second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Fair. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Andrew, you still there?
Yes, sir.
You also check on code enforcement, that building that's back behind there too, because that building looks terrible.
Yes, sir. We'll do that. We'll check on it.
Thank you, council.
Yep.
Thank you.
I do want to mention that anything you see around town that says R&W sales, there's lots of properties. You have a boat storage warehouse over on the south side of Walnut Avenue. As you go over the bridge, you can look down to your right. Aesthetically, everything that Mr. Mitchell and Wayne Burgess do as business partners aesthetically has improved our city. So if you see their stamp on something, it looks good. And I think that's worth mentioning. This would, no doubt in my mind, this will look good too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Tell your grandfather that the mayor is looking for him.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Number two, ordinance 22-34, the request of East Morris Properties LLC to rezone from general commercial to central business district, a tract of land totaling 0.62 acres located at 222 East Morris Street, Dalton, Georgia, parcel 12-238-18-004. Ethan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This piece of property here, of course, currently general commercial. The change to central business district is necessary for one reason, and that is in order to remodel the building that is there now and reuse it for a different commercial development. In order for them to reinvest in that property, right now it sits on 0 lot line, I believe, on the east boundary of that property. And the issue with that is that within the C2 zone district, you have to have side setbacks and all conventional setbacks. And with that being a 0 lot line, what that means is this building is grandfathered in, it's non-conforming. And because it requires a significant amount of renovation, it will require a rezoning in order to be conforming. And the only zone district we have that permits a 0 lot line commercial development is our central business district or downtown district. And when we looked at that, we really see no issue in this area. It's already, as you mentioned earlier, with the redevelopment along East Morris Street, we already see C3 on numerous properties in this area. We do take into consideration that the only issue that we had to think about long-term was that right now, public parking on East Morris at this area and this location is very limited. There's almost essentially no on-street parking and a very, very small amount of publicly owned parking area. So we just wanted to make sure that any development out there is going to be able to have off-street parking provided for as a part of their development. So the staff recommendation was to approve, citing no issues with the rezoning or the building that's there, and no issue with the pattern of development. And the recommendation was to ensure that a minimum of 25 spaces on the subject property are maintained so that if any kind of expansion of the building or any kind of redevelopment of the property beyond just remodeling the building that's there is to occur in the future, we want to ensure that at least 25 parking spaces can be maintained off-street on that property, satisfy the parking needs for that area since there is a significant lack of public parking. And we believe that there is more than, well, we know that there are more than 25 available parking spaces on that property now. So that was not an issue for the petitioner to agree to.
It's the car business the repair business that burned down. Is it
Our-
the same owners or new owners?
Not sure if that's the same owner or a new owner. Can't answer to that.
Andrew, you know who, is that the same guy?
Yes, I believe it's the same gentleman, and this has been an active code enforcement case where we've been working to push the owner to develop a solution for this property that's been unfortunately a nuisance almost for the last few years since it burned. So they've actually already provided renderings and architectural drawings of what the redevelopment will look like. So this rezone will help accommodate that.
Any other questions? Your motion?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Sams, is there a second?
Second.
Good. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
All opposed, like sign. Number three, ordinance 22-35, the request of East Morris Properties LLC to rezone from heavy manufacturing M2 to Central Business District C3, a tract of land totaling 0.17 acres located at 411 South Glenwood Street, Dalton, Georgia, parcel 12-12-238-18-023.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Same, of course, same petitioner, same area, same circumstances and situation. The staff recommendation in this case recommended C4 just for conventional setbacks and primarily off-street parking be required since this is an undeveloped tract, unlike the other piece of property. The petitioner did want to make a point that they did want C3 in order to be able to get 0 lot line building area so that they could build a relatively decently sized commercial building on this property to be able to house an office or retail use. The petitioner had no issue at all with us imposing a condition that he would be able to provide for at least the average or the standard parking rate, which would be 5 parking spaces for every 1,000 square feet of gross leasable commercial floor area. So in the public hearing, he agreed that that would be a condition that he could certainly meet if he was granted a C3 rezoning. And we didn't really see any issue with setbacks or that C3 character at that area. The issue again that we looked at for especially along Glenwood Avenue with higher traffic volumes than Emory Street, safe ingress, egress, and sufficient off-street parking, being that there is no on-street parking on Glenwood Avenue at that location. So the recommendation or the staff recommendation was for C4. The Planning Commission recommended the C3 rezoning with a condition that the standard parking, off-street parking rules apply for that district. And that would be 5 spaces per every 1,000 square feet of gross commercial floor area on any new building.
This is a question, I guess, for Mr. Miller and for you, Ethan. Is saying that with conditions not the same thing as saying C4?
The difference is C4 would require conventional building setbacks, which would mean that he would not be able to build a building to zero lot line. And because the fact this property is so narrow, that would greatly reduce his buildable area for a commercial building. And by those conventional setbacks, it would also shrink his parking area. So he would have to build a very small commercial operation in C4. C3 would grant him the ability to build to that zero lot line and provide for parking in this instance.
Is it enforceable, Mr. Miller, to do a C3 but with those
With
conditions?
conditions, yes.
So it's enforceable if we,
It is a hybrid. And that's not atypical or unusual
Okay.
in Georgia zoning.
so that's done. Okay.
And we say here, both in the previous and this one, in accordance with the recommendation of the planning commission, that will include those conditions, correct? Those do bleed through to the administrator. So I don't mean our
Correct.
administrator, but the planning administrator. And when permits are issued, correct?
Correct, exactly. And, you know, conditions long-term, you know, we always look at the ability to pass on institutional knowledge so that 20 years later, people are aware of these conditions. But in instances like these, conditions are very effective because the development hasn't occurred yet. And for them to get a permit with any kind of recent time, we're going to be able to make sure that that's enforced and make sure that those conditions are applied.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, the reason I'm asking from a city attorney's standpoint is whether or not in these somewhat templated ordinances that we use at the council level, do we need to be more specific in describing all these conditions, or is it working administratively when we say in accordance with the recommendation of the planning commission?
I think it works fine just saying accordance
Okay,
with the
it's
recommendation.
worked, that's fine. I just wanted to be sure we didn't need to do more.
I think it's perfect.
Does the staff have heartburn about doing C3 with those conditions?
No, I think that's a perfectly reasonable way to address that and be able to have a compromise and get the developer enough area to build on that property with making sure that again, the main issue there and the main reason we recommended C4 was primarily for parking. And it's easier to do an out and out rezoning long-term administratively than to do conditions, because you do have to notate that on the map and you do have to make sure you keep a very good record of those conditions for posterity. But given this circumstance, you know, the petitioner wanted to keep that C3 request, and we don't see that it's going to create any kind of negative impact to adjacent property. And we believe that with that parking condition, that will satisfy the issue that we were concerned with.
Thank you.
Any other questions? There a motion?
So move that it be C3 with the conditions as we've discussed.
Motion by Ms. Sams, there's a second.
Second.
By Mr. Good, all in favor, say aye.
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 Number 4, ordinance 22-36, the request of Amanda Brown to rezone from medium density, single family residential R3 to limited commercial C1A, a tract of land totaling 0.36 acres located at 524 and 526 West Hawthorne Street, Dalton, Georgia. Tax parcels 12-199-20-004 and 12-199-20-005.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've got 2 tracts of land here that were formerly residential properties. single family detached. And the request here was made by Ms. Brown as a representative of the Creative Arts Guild in order to expand their current campus and be able to utilize the existing structures on the subject property for either storage space or additional classroom space for the Arts Guild. The C1A zone district is the most restricted commercial zone district in the zoning ordinance and is a hybrid zone ordinance that allows residential development or very limited commercial and office style development, provided that that commercial and office style development be housed in buildings that have a single family or a residential character. So essentially, this request would really not change the character of this area. The C1A district is a very large zone district throughout this area and already applies to the Creative Arts Guild's main campus across the street. And when we look at any kind of future plans for this property in the public hearing, the petitioner did note that they may one day in the future, they could potentially utilize this property for additional parking, overflow parking, if they were to build an additional structure on the main Arts Guild campus. But they have stated that they have no current site plans or building plans or any such thing to indicate that that would be any point in the near future. And if they were to redevelop the subject property for any such purpose, a new building or a parking area, they would be required at that point to provide for a minimum of a 15-foot buffer where they're adjacent to any other residential property. Staff recommendation in this case was to approve. We saw no issue with the comprehensive plan in this area, the development pattern, or the petitioner's plans for the property. We heard no opposition in the public hearing, except for one lady that did speak that she was not opposed to them utilizing the existing buildings there. She was concerned that if they were to be demolished, she was concerned with debris and respiratory health and things like that. There would be a byproduct of that as her being a neighbor. But she did state that she had no opposition whatsoever in order for them to be able to utilize this property as overflow classrooms and things to that nature, or even storage, as long as the buildings are remaining in place.
If they were to raise the buildings and make a parking lot out of it, could they do that under this proposed zoning change that they're proposing?
They could utilize that area for parking only, but again, they would have to create for a buffer in that case as well. Anything that would change the character of this property in terms of either building a new building back or raising those buildings and doing a parking lot, they would be required to provide for that buffer at that point and meet all other city codes.
They did raise the buildings and wanted to build some other type of structure. I understood you earlier say it'd have to be in a residential nature type structure.
Right. It would have to, it couldn't be a conventional style commercial building. It would have to be essentially, in this case, it would need to be a one-story building to be similar to what's already in that area.
So it couldn't be similar to their building across the street, which would be more of a commercial nature, wouldn't it?
Right.
I
We
think
have
that
to
gets-
look into there might be a variant situation, something like that. They would have to come back before and we'd have to take a look at that. I'm sorry, Miss.
I was gonna say that as we look at design standards, I think, and architecture's changing and you look at these newer modern looks, I think we're getting really subjective about, what I think and you think and someone else thinks that would be helpful about design standards because what looks modern almost looks commercial in some ways and that you see places. I do, Andrew, I know there's a slight delay, but if we could communicate to Chad Townsend at Public Works to get it on our agenda to talk about how law enforcement can do some kind of a protected, maybe a light or something, stripe it, pedestrian crossing if kids are going over there or adults or anyone to take classes, that right angle turn would want to somehow direct people to walk maybe on a certain path, because that just concerns me. Doesn't prevent me from wanting to vote in the affirmative on this. It's just I want to make sure we can do whatever is within our ability to protect some walking or try and direct people to walk where there's as good sight distance as possible if folks are going to be walking over to class.
We will do that. We can do an intersection analysis and come up with the best plan for pedestrian crossing safety. And of course, with this being just down the road from the police service center, get them involved as well in the review.
Just want people to get to be safe. Obviously, they're gonna be walking over there, even if it's just the staff back and forth.
Any other questions? Your motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Ferris, second by Mr. Goodlet. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like. Your motion, we adjourn.
So move.
Second.